A new report from the Economic Policy Institute finds that the wage gap among black individuals and white individuals not only exists, but it's actually grown throughout the decades. Now, they found that last year, the hourly pay gap between blacks and whites widened to 26.7%, with whites making an average of $25.22 an hour compared to $18.49 an hour for blacks. Now, in 1979, if you compare the numbers, you see that that gap has widened. The gap in 1979 between blacks and whites was 18.1%, with whites earning an inflation-adjusted average of $19.62 an hour and blacks earning $16.07 an hour. So the most interesting part of this study is not that the wage gap exists or that it's even widened, because that's something that I feel like I could have predicted, right? But a lot of people would probably turn to, institutional racism as the root cause for it. So the lack of access to higher education or education in general, living in poor neighborhoods, a lower socioeconomic status. But the researchers actually controlled for those variables, and they found that those are not the reasons why the wage gap exists. One of the main reasons why is because of straight out discrimination. So if you have a black sounding name, for instance, you're less likely to get hired. And then the other part of it is partially institutional racism when you think about it. It's the fact that mass incarceration impacts African Americans more than any other demographic. And that's because of things like marijuana laws, okay? Blacks and whites smoke marijuana at the same rate, but blacks are 4 times more likely to get arrested for using marijuana. That's one statistic to give to you.
So, by the way, when you do the surveillance state, in a recent story we talked about how black schools are more likely to have cameras and random sweeps for not just weapons, but for anything illegal, and have police there, and then the kids and the police get into fights, and then they get arrested, etc. And again, that study controlled for, is it just based on poor neighborhoods or high crime neighborhoods? Even when you control for that, no, it was actually based on African American neighborhoods more than those factors. So when you look at all those things, they accumulate into that number. Yep. So if there's more black people in jail, then they're going to obviously bring down the average of the amount of money that's being made. Now, look, there's one piece of good news is that even adjusted for inflation, both black and white wages have gone up a little bit. Okay, I'll call that kind of good news because it's been a long, long time and it went up a little bit. But there's a widening gulf, and so so this is not surprising to us because we cover the news every day, but you guys don't see every story we do, obviously. Let me give you another example of why it especially affects them in the job market. It's that famous study that was done of what were considered Anglo-sounding names and African-American sounding names on resumes. Same exact resume, word for word, letter for letter. The only thing at the top was the difference was the name. Black sounding names got called back 50% less. So just on their name alone, they're so much less likely to get a job, to get a better job. So then are you surprised that there's a wage gap? Of course there's going to be a wage gap.
Right. And I think a lot of the discrimination is not necessarily intended, right? I don't think a lot of people who discriminate do so intentionally or even knowingly. I think they do it unwittingly. Of course, right? Yes. I think it's, something subconscious or maybe unconscious that's going on where they see a certain name and they think, okay, that name is associated or has a certain connotation, right? And so as a result,
I don't even think that they think about it consciously for 1 second.
Yeah.
So I feel like I have to keep telling white folks this when we do these stories. It's not to say you did it and you did it on purpose. No, that's what the studies are showing is that it's a unconscious bias. Yeah. That you go, oh, okay, that's in this pile and that's in this pile, and you're doing it really quickly. And when they study the piles, they're like, oh, turns out, the white-sounding names have got much more callbacks. It's in all of our heads. The reason we do these stories, one, is to shed a light on it because it's true and you've got to know it. And 2 is, if we put a spotlight on it, maybe we could get it out of our heads.
Yeah, exactly. It's about kind of changing our behavior and being more aware of the way we're acting, as opposed to just placing blame on someone and making it seem like you're a bad person. I don't think that people who do this are bad people. I just think that they're unaware and they should know, right? And I think it affects everyone. I don't think that we're immune to this. I mean, I'm sure that we have certain unconscious biases ourselves that we're completely unaware of, and that's why studies like this are so important. That's how you progress in society.
At the Young Turks, we believe in change. We believe we can change the media, make it more independent. Come do it with us. tytnetwork.com/join.